Hi there, it's me, Ben, or GNC Centric, and today I'm going to be doing a reading of Sapphistries by Leila J. Rupp. Yeah, happy Lesbian Visibility Day. That's why I decided to start today. So my plan with this is to just do a casual reading, and leave it up for people to read after. I'm trying to make stuff more accessible for people. And I might turn it into a podcast as well and upload it on like Apple or whatever. So the book is called Sapphistries by Leila J. Rupp, A Global History of Love Between Women. What got me really excited about this book is how early it starts. So chapter 1 is the introduction, and chapter 2 is in the beginning, 40,000 to 1200 BCE. That's crazy to me. I'm very excited to see what she has to say about that. So let's just get started. Preface. When I have told people over the past couple of years that I was writing a short, accessible, synthetic global history of love between women from the beginning of time to the present, they often laughed or rolled their eyes. I understood why. It is an insanely ambitious project, so I am especially grateful for the confidence of Michael Kimmel and Suzanne Walters, editors of the Intersection series, and Elaine Kalish, executive director of the New York University Press, that I could pull this off. The idea for this book emerged from a course called Sapphistries that I developed at the University of California, Santa Barbara. Or maybe it was the other way around. Having returned to my original academic home in women's studies, I decided to shift my focus from a comparative angle on male and female same-sex sexuality to a concentration on desire, love, and sex between women. It has been an adventure. I am grateful for the students in my Sapphistries classes for their enthusiasm for the subject, their perceptive questions, and helping me to think about things in new ways. I am also thankful for the works of my colleagues in the Department of Feminist Studies, Jacqueline Bobo, Eileen Boris, Grace Chang, Barbara Hawthorne, Ellie Hernandez, Muriel Miller-Young, Lori Oakes, and Barbara Tomlinson, all of whom, in vastly different ways, have opened my eyes to new ways of looking at teaching and scholarship. My chair and friend, Eileen Boris, has been particularly supportive, and I could not have gone on without the wonderful work of our feminist studies staff, Lou Ann Lockwood, Christina Toy, and Blanca Nuila. Lou Ann, in particular, has shared lunches, coffees, heart-to-heart talks, and dog-sitting for Phoebe. Of course, this book could not have been written without the amazing scholarship, far more than I thought when I set out to write, of so many fine scholars. The notes and references track their contributions, but I want to name a few here whose work I have used especially extensively. Evelyn Blackwood, Bernadette Britton, Rudolf Decker, and Lode Van Poel, Lillian Federman, Marty Liebeck, Jacqueline Murray, Gregory Fledgefelder, Tsai Lang Sang, Valerie Traub, Ruth Vanita, Martha Vincinus, and Saskia Waringa. Thank you for making this book possible. It goes without saying that the mistakes, and how could there not be many in a project of this scope, are mine alone. I would also like to thank a number of scholars, students, and friends who suggested books or articles, sent me unpublished or newly published work, and answered frantic queries, or just provided reassurances that I was not entirely overlooking something important. These include Ken Adrian, April Bible, Kirsten Bruner, Elise Chenier, Laura Doan, Cameron Dutter, Stephanie Gilmore, Carrie Hamilton, Daniel Hidalgo, Marty Liebeck, Mark McClelland, Jose Ramos Rebello, Erica Rappaport, John Redenstrom, Bridget Soland, Seb Tortritsky, Valerie Trobe, and Martha Vincenus. Lachelle Hennikel and Susan Braswell translated the caption for Figure 14, for which I am very grateful. In the midst of writing this book, I was heartened by the reception of my talk at the Women's History Workshop at Ohio State, my former home. The enthusiasm and support of my former colleagues, and not only my dear friends and women historian Susan Hartman and Bridget Soland, meant so much. I doubt that I ever would have attempted to write a global history without having been part of the World History group at Ohio State, so I thank them all as well. I am so grateful for the comments of Tom Lacour and audience members at the sessions where I talked about this project at the American Historical Association conference in 2009. Having finished the book, I had the pleasure of speaking at the University of Connecticut, where I benefited from the questions and the comments of colleagues from history and sociology. At New York University Press, Aidan Amos provided valuable advice on illustrations. Despina Papazoglu Gimbel managed the production process efficiently, and Andrew Katz did a careful job of copy editing. My friend Kate Weingard, a scholar in her own right, produced a beautiful index. I would not have completed this project without the financial support of the UC Santa Barbara Academic Senate and the Division of Social Sciences and the incredible resources at the University of California Libraries, especially the Interlibrary Loan Department. Melvin Oliver, Dean of Social Sciences, provided a research support, a job as Associate Dean to occupy my free time, and the kind of encouragement, friendship, and laughter that one does not always associate with the title Dean. Lisa Leitz has been the most astonishingly creative research assistant, working magic on a regular basis. I don't know how she does it, but I could not have survived without her help. I am also indebted to Lisa Dugan and Arlene Stein, formerly anonymous reviewers of the book proposal, Ruth Vanita, and still anonymous reviewer of the manuscript, and other anonymous readers who provided both criticism and support in the process of my final career review in the endlessly bureaucratic University of California system. John D'Amelio, Estelle Friedman, Joanne Meyerowitz, and Joan W. Scott read parts of the manuscript and wrote letters in support of my fellowship proposal, for which I am very grateful, even though I didn't get the fellowship. Later, Joanne Bridget Soland and Verda Taylor read the whole thing solely out of friendship, and more in Verda's case. All the comments and suggestions from these generous colleagues proved challenging and helped greatly to improve the manuscript. There were many moments when I wondered why I had taken on such a foolhardy project, and Bridget especially buoyed me when I needed it most. Phoebe was with me through almost every minute of work on this book. She didn't help at all, but her devotion goes a long way. And then there is Verda, to whom I dedicate this book. For 30 years she has worked and played with me, inspired me with her brilliance, and loved me through the good times and bads. When we first met, we used to joke about being sure to leave behind evidence of our relationship so no future historians could say we were just good friends. In a way, that is what set me on the path of writing Sapphistries. Verda, I can't imagine my life without you. Introduction. Sapphistries. Histories and stories of female same-sex desire, love, and sexuality after Sappho, 6th century BCE poet of Lesbos. The lesbian poet Sappho, whatever her erotic history, bequeathed both her name and her place of residence to the phenomenon of desire, love, and sex between women. Her iconic image as a lover of women has transcended the boundaries of history and geography, bestowing on women who desire women the labels sapphic and lesbian. Because the term sapphic has a longer and more widespread history than lesbian, I have named this book Sapphistries, an invented word, although not an entirely original one, to embrace all the diverse manifestations of women and social males with women's bodies who desire, love, and made love to, formed relationships with, and married other women. Sapphism is a name that stuck through the centuries, and not only in the European tradition. An 11th century poet in Muslim Spain earned the moniker the Arab Sappho, a Japanese loan word, saphuo, coined in the 1900s, referred to female same-sex sexuality. A Chinese critic in 1925 translated one of Sappho's fragments into Chinese, pointing out that women's same-sex love is called sapphism. A conference in Melbourne, Australia in 1995, organized by lesbians from a minority ethnic and racial backgrounds, took the title Sappho Was a Wog Girl. How impossible it is to dissociate Sappho from her legacy is suggested by the fact that in 2008, a Greek court dismissed the request of 3 residents of Lesbos for a ban on the use of the word lesbian for anyone other than the inhabitants of the Aegean Isle. The only term that has a broader historical reach, if not the same poetics, is tribadism, from the Greek and Latin word meaning to rub, its numerous linguistics variations. The Arabic term sak, sihak, and masahaka are all derived from the verbal root shq, meaning to pound, bruise a face, or render something soft, sometimes translated as rubbing. In Hebrew, the term for women who have sex with other women is masalet, masalelet, meaning to rub. Female same-sex behavior in Chinese is called mojingzi, rubbing mirrors, or mirror grinding. The word in Swahili for lesbian is mskal, mskaji, which means a grinder. In Urdu and related languages, the term for female same-sex sexual activity, chapat, chapati, and chapabazi, are all related to flatness or flattening. Tortilleras is the term used to refer to lesbians in Cuba and elsewhere in Latin America. A French dictionary from 1690 defined a tribade as a shameless woman enamored of one of her own sex, and finished off the definition with a simple statement: Sappho was a tribade. An English pamphlet from 1734 blamed Sappho for introducing a new sort of sin called the flats, so I suppose my title might have more global reach if it were called Tribadi or Rubbing Through Time, but both lack, in my opinion, the elegance of Sapphistries. In the interest of elegance, too, my subtitle, and sometimes text, intends love to cover desires and sex as well as women, to include those with female bodies who might not have identified as women. It is, I must admit, an audacious undertaking to tackle desire, love, and sexuality across such a vast expanse of time and space. On the other hand, the enormous variety of ways that women have come together in society, ranging from ancient China, India, and the Mediterranean world, to contemporary Thailand, Mexico, and South Africa, can only support the social constructionist perspective on sexuality that insists on the impact of societal structures and concepts in shaping the ways that people have experienced desire, have love, have sex, form relationships, and think about themselves. On the other hand, the very act of putting between two covers such a wide range of ways that women have loved one another raises the danger that we think of them all in one large category. Some scholars, for political reasons, insist on that category being called lesbian, even if that is not a term or a concept embraced by a particular society. Adrienne Rich in 1981 famously introduced the concepts of lesbian existence and the lesbian continuum to embrace a wide range of women bonding behaviors characterized primarily by resistance to male domination. Since then, debates have raged about what qualifies a woman as a lesbian throughout history and cross cultures. Taking off from Rich and following her emphasis on autonomy from male control, medieval historian Judith Bennett argues for the term lesbian-like, which she uses to describe a range of medieval European women. She tells, for example, of two different covens that housed women who fit her concepts. One was founded by a widow in Ferrara, who put together her dowry with contributions from other women to buy property and establish a community that she managed to keep out from under male church authority for almost 20 years. She and her companions lived together, devoting themselves to religion and good works, and when she died, she named another woman their heir, with the obligation to maintain the community in the same form. With the language of piety, she created a life independent of the control of men, whether husbands or church authorities. The other coven was Montpellier and housed former prostitutes who were old, repentant, or moving away from prostitution to marriage. They were not cloistered and had only minor religious duties. In neither case is there any evidence of same-sex desire or sexual behavior, but that is precisely Bennett's point, that, in the first case, the desire for independence from men is lesbian-like, and that, in the second, the long historical connection between prostitution and same-sex love is suggestive. I understand the appeal both of boldly claiming visibility where it barely exists by embracing the term lesbian, and of keeping the association while recognizing the difference between contemporary lesbians and what Bennett would call lesbian-like women of the past. But I have chosen a different path. Too broad use of the term lesbian, I think, downplays the differences among women, especially when the concept and identity of lesbian is available and women choose not to embrace it, as occurs in many parts of the world today, where a transnationally available lesbian identity is known, but women who desire women have different ways of thinking about themselves. So I choose to use the term that does not apply to women themselves, but to their histories and stories. And, unlike Bennett, I am not willing to consider women who sought independence from men and women who sought the privileges of men, if they did not also give some hint of desire for love for women as part of Sapphistries. The question of whether sex matters is determined in determining who is part of lesbian or lesbian-like history has been much debated. This issue came to the fore particularly in the context of romantic friendships and passionate and socially acceptable ties between women in the 19th century that first came to the attention of Carol Smith Rosenberg's classic article, The Female World of Love and Ritual. Then Lillian Faderman, in her pioneering book Surpassing the Love of Men, connected romantic friendship to contemporary lesbian feminism while arguing that most romantic friends probably did not have sexual relationships. Whether or not romantic friends or other women who expressed passionate love for each other engaged in sexual acts is a question that has increasingly aroused fierce debate in the context of the feminist sex wars, a struggle born in the 1980s overemphasizing the pleasure as opposed to the danger of sexuality. The most recent studies of romantic friendship by Martha Vicinus and Sharon Marcus leave no doubt about the erotic and sexual aspects of at least some of these relationships. In the ongoing debate about how much sex matters, I come down firmly on the side of the centrality of sexual desire, erotic love, and/or sexual behavior, and thinking about which women in the past and present are part of this story. But of course, the difficult question is, what counts as desire, love, and sex? Are expressions that sound to our modern ears like desire actually that? Can we tell erotic love from non-erotic friendship? Is genital activity necessary to a sexual act? Is genital activity always a sexual act? These later questions are especially difficult. Having read about the caressing of breasts between two African American women in the mid-19th century, and European and US romantic friends kissing and hugging and laying with heads on laps, my students in one class, having been asked what counts as sex, thought they knew where to draw the line. What they called tongue action in kissing and below the waist action in caressing counts as sex. Anything else does not. But such a definition, though clearly making sense to 21st century US college students, cannot stand up to the girls and women in Lesotho who French kiss, rub one another's labias to stretch and beautify them, and even engage in cunnilingus, but who insist that it is not sexual because there is no penis. Nor can it stand up to Kung Sen girls who likewise engage in sexual play, but are not sure what it means, asking, can two vaginas screw? So what looks very much like sexual activity to us may not be understood that way, and what may seem to cross whatever line we imagine dividing foreplay from sex may in fact very much count as sex to the women involved. And all the same uncertainty applies to what counts as desire and what counts as erotic love. Then there's the problem of evidence. Given the long history at play here, and the extremely limited literacy of women, testimony from the mouths or pens of women is very rare until modern times. So most of the evidence we have through the centuries comes from men. Their prohibitions, their reports, their literature, their art, their imaginings, their pornography, their court cases. Here and there, the views of women themselves can be gleaned, and I have tried mightily to make use of the creative research of scholars who have listened and heard the voices of women, even if we need to acknowledge that the context and filtering of such voices mean that they are in reality representations rather than some fundamental truth about experience. We also have to assume that representations, both sexual and visual, created by men tell us something about the possibility of love and sex between women in different societies. But I recognize that any decision about where to draw the lines, who is in and who is out in a history of love between women, is tricky. Perhaps most problematic is my inclusion of female-bodied individuals who did not or do not consider themselves women, even if they did not or do not consider themselves men. Judith Halberstam developed the concept of perverse presentism to suggest that what we do not know for sure today about the relationship between masculinity and lesbianism, we cannot know for sure about historical relations between same-sex desire and female masculinities. Because we often do not know what such individuals themselves thought about their gender and sexuality, and because the act of female bodies having sex together was often what the authorities saw as most important, I include them here, being careful not to assume either that they were transgendered in a contemporary sense, or that they were like the female gendered women who desired or had sex with other female gendered women. Although most of my sources are conventional historical ones, I am also taking liberties by using some literary texts not as historical sources, but as ways to help us imagine answers to questions that cannot be addressed with existing evidence. These are texts that reflect their own time and place while portraying another. So, for example, I use Eric Jong's Sappho's Leap, a novel, which reflects contemporary thinking about the fluidity of sexual identities, to engage with the historical Sappho's identity, a short story by Sarah Maitland, The Burning Times, to think about the possibilities of witchcraft, accusations, and love between women, and in the riskiest historical move of all, Jackie Kay's Trumpet, a novel about a contemporary British biracial transgender musician, to imagine what the wives of women who secretly crossed the gender line through the past centuries might have thought. I am aware of the conceptual risks posed by such a strategy, but I believe that the advantages outweigh the danger of contributing to a vision of transhistorical sameness. And I am inspired by Monique Wittig, who wrote Les Guerriers, make an effort to remember, or failing that, invent. These literary texts, as imaginative interpretations, remind us that historical scholarship, too, although based on evidence, is also an act of interpretation. Sapphistries not only brings together extremely scattered and disconnected research on a wide range of phenomena, but also, I hope, contributes to ongoing discussions about the nature of sexuality across time and place. Certainly, the range of ways that women have come together make clear that how women act on their desires, what kinds of acts they engage in, and with whom, what kinds of meanings they attribute to those desires and acts, how they think about the relationship between love and sexuality, whether they think of sexuality as having meaning for identities, whether they form communities with people with like desires. All of these are shaped by the societies in which they live. At the same time, however, we must confront the persistence of certain patterns in the history of female same sex sexuality, particularly the role of female masculinity and the eroticization of friendship. That is, we find very different societies shaping erotic relationships between women in quite similar ways. Here it is useful to remember that anthropologist Carol Vance, in a classic article on the social constructionism, pointed out that recognizing ways that societies construct sexuality differently does not mean that there are never similarities. Making a similar point, literary scholar Valerie Trobe confronts the question of why certain ways that women loved women in the past seem so familiar despite very different social contexts. She proposed a new way of thinking about the sense of uncanny familiarity, which strikes us so often in thinking about women's relationships with women in different times and places. To simplify a complex argument, she suggests that there are certain overreaching ways that desire, love, and sex between women have been understood and enacted across time, and that those understandings and definitions appear, disappear, and reappear in different points. What she calls cycles of salience account for our sense that, for example, medieval nuns in love are like 19th century romantic friends. It is Trobe's hope that such a perspective will make possible a transnational history of lesbianism across time. It is my hope that Sapphistries makes a start in that direction, even though that is not the description I would use. The ways that that love between women have been understood, I suggest, include the following: that a woman who desires another woman is masculine, that her body marks her as different from other women, that she is wanton, that she is deprived of access of men, and that she hates men. These understandings emerge in different conceptions across history and cultures, as we shall see in the encountering manly women, female husbands, butches, and Thai toms, all embodying masculinity. Hermaphrodites and women with enlarged clitorises, whose bodies mark them, wanton women, including those from Lesbos, witches, prostitutes, and aristocratic tribads, secluded women, nuns, and schoolgirls, all presumably deprived of men, and man-haters, such as Amazons and lesbian feminists. At some point in time, in some places, one or another conceptions hold sway. That is why we can make transhistorical comparisons without assuming some essentialist lesbian that can be found everywhere. But these are just the ways that women who love women have been understood from the outside. What about their own conceptions, their own understandings of who they are? This is where the two persistent forms of relationships come into play: masculine-feminine attraction, in which gender difference is eroticized, and the eroticized friendship, in which sameness shapes desire. As we move throughout time and around the globe, we find these two patterns appearing and reappearing. The existing works that have tried to encompass a global history of same sex sexuality, based mostly on the history of men, have constructed three or four basic categories of relationships: those differentiated by age, those differentiated by gender, sometimes those differentiated by class or race, and those not differentiated in any other sense, in any of these ways. That last category tends to be the most rare and the most modern. These categories have less resonance in the history of the female same sex sexuality. Cross generational relationships, though not entirely missing, are not as central, and the eroticization of racial and ethnic and class difference that has been identified for men as little counterpart among women. Non-differentiated relationships seem to be much more common. David Halperin, in his parodic book How to Do the History of Homosexuality, suggests that it may be because of male dominance and female subordination that a history of lesbianism exists in a different relation to time from the history of male homosexuality. Much of the history of male same-sex sexuality is shaped by elite men's privilege to penetrate social inferiors, including boys, women, slaves, servants, and lower-class men, as long as they also fulfilled their familiar responsibilities to marry and beget heirs. We need to ask, how has women's relative lack of privilege and lack of access to public space shaped an entirely different story? Likewise, the part men play in sexual acts as inserters, or what I like to call enclosers, plays a central role in how they are perceived, with those who wielded their penises privilege over those who enclosed those penises. The story for women is different. Whereas masculine women who penetrated their lovers with penis-like objects tended to arouse particular horror in some places, sexual role is less important, as the persistent image of mutual rubbing attests. And the emphasis on transformation, when elite men could no longer penetrate any of their social inferiors without consequences for their normality and masculinity, has no counterpart in the history of women. I hope to show, then, how the different trajectories of female as compared to male same-sex love and desire transform our understanding of the history of sexualities. Another major goal of this book is to undermine a Western-dominated narrative of progress and to join the voices of scholars who have argued for complex understanding of the ways that local and global identities interact in the contemporary world. The historical resources are much more numerous for Europe and United States and for modern history, so there is no way to provide a balanced account with regard to coverage. But I have worked hard to locate scholarship on every part of the world and, more important, to avoid a narrative triumphal progress based on the Western tradition. This is not to deny how much of the success of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer movements, when they have flourished, have changed the world for the better. But a global view makes clear, for example, that emergence into public, so important in the history of same-sex sexuality in the Western world, is not everywhere significant. That desire and love between women can flourish without heterosexual social arrangements, and that the emergence of lesbian identity and the focus so much of the scholarship on the history of female same-sex sexuality is a minor part of the story of Sapphistries. A global view also reveals a persistent inclination to blame others, people from other countries or class or racial others within a society, for sexual desire and behaviors denounced as deviant. Beginning with an imagined prehistory and moving around the globe, this book provides a uniquely sweeping and a global view of female same-sex love and sexuality. Chapter 2 deals with the mythical prehistories of women-only societies and theories of the origins of human societies, as well as creation stories and myths from diverse cultural contexts that engage with the possibilities of female same-sex love. Chapter 3 ranges across Egyptian, Chinese, Indian, Inca, and Aztec civilizations, providing context for the better-known histories of Greek and Roman cultures, including Sappho of Lesbos. Then, in Chapter 4, I move across the long stretch of time, considering the traditions of the great world religions, and then exploring women's relationships in sex-segregated spaces such as monasteries and polygynous households, women mystics and witches, and women caught in the act of having sex with other women. Chapter 5 turns to institutionalized cross gender and third gender phenomena in Native American, Indian, and Balkan societies. Female husbands, who, as social males, married women in some African societies, and women who were secretly crossed the gender line and married women in early modern European society and later in the United States, Australia, and New Zealand. Chapter 6 explores the emergence of nascent communities, the beginning of urban groups of women, the roaring girls of London, the randy women of Amsterdam, women in brothels and prisons, aristocrat women, European women accused of tribadism, marriage resistance, movements in China, portrayals of love between women in Urdu poetry, and the emergence of romantic friendship among women across Europe and the United States. In Chapter 7, I explore in the context of different words applied to women who have had sex with other women, the emergence of the concept of lesbian. It spread across European sexologists to China and Japan, and the complicated responses of women around the world who sometimes acknowledged and sometimes rejected and sometimes ignored the potential new identity. Chapter 8 treats cultures and communities of women who, sometimes deliberately and sometimes not, made love between women public. Beginning with the communities of schoolgirls in Europe and the United States, China, and Japan, I turn to feminist communities. The private yet public world of the Paris salon of Natalie Barney, the lesbian commercial establishments that emerged in New York, Paris, and Berlin in the 1920s, and in other places in the 1950s, and the growth and spread of lesbian publications and organizations from the 1920s on. Chapter 9 considers a wide range of ways that women in the contemporary world have continued to love women, from finding one another in sex-segregated spaces to falling in love with co-wives, to marrying one another legally, to crossing the gender line, to embracing masculine-feminine pairs, to falling in love with their friends. In fact, every way that women in the past found to express their desire and love. The conclusion reviews this sprawling history and returns to the question of how a consideration of Sapphistries revises our understanding of the global histories of same-sex sexuality. So Sapphistries is the story of goddesses and Amazons, Sappho and the Arab Sappho, nuns and witches, manly women and female husbands, roaring girls and aristocratic tribads, sworn sisters and sweet doganas, schoolgirls in love and Parisian salonneries, German girlfriends and butches and femmes, mummies and babies, Toms and Dees, tomboys and Maddie. But let us begin at the beginning by wondering whether sex between women might have existed in the earliest human societies. Chapter 2. In the beginning. 40,000 to 1200 BCE. Here is one imagining beginning, not of the world, but of a human society. In the beginning of time, there were only women, bearers of 2 unbroken X chromosomes. They reproduce through parthenogenesis, a process that occurs elsewhere in the natural world, in which females give birth without contact with males. And human, that is, female, society was a wonder to behold. Then some disease or bombardment of radiation from the sun damaged one healthy X chromosome, chopping off the right lower leg and creating a mutant man. This was the beginning of the end for a glorious lost civilization in which women were at first the only and then the superior and dominant sex. For the mutation that brought men into the world began a long process that culminated in the triumph of men's revolution and the beginning of recorded history. The revolution was so complete that it wiped out almost all memory of the earlier great civilization. But hints remain. Myths of Atlantis and other lost worlds, the complexity of ancient languages compared to modern ones, ancient maps that depict parts of the world with inexplicable accuracy, and the earliest origin stories in which the world is created by a goddess. The peaceful matriarchal utopian world of the women, the first sex, gave way to the brutality of the mutants, as women, who chose their sexual partners turned to meat-eating men whose dietary habits increased both their overall body size and the heft of their organs of reproduction. Thus, the fall of women came through the pull of a metaphorical, not literal, snake. This is the tale spun by Elizabeth Gould Davis in a provocative, dare I say outrageous, book first published in 1971, in the context of resurgence of U.S. feminism. It is a counter-narrative to the biblical tale of Adam and Eve, offering man created through a genetic mutation from a woman as an alternative to women created from the rib of man. Davis says nary a word about the sex between women, but her tale opens up the possibility of a sort of 1970-style lesbian commune lost in the midst of time. That possibility is taken up with gusto in another imaginative and equally provocative account of the origins of human society in Lesbian Origins. Lesbian feminist sociologist Susan Cavan boldly proclaims that since we cannot ever know what the earliest society was like, her theory is as good as any other foisted on us by what she calls patroscientists, defined in her glossary as scientists who are apologists for patriarchy. Based loosely on primate behavior, creation myths, and, in truth, wishful thinking, Cavan depicts gynosociety, a gynosociety composed of women and their children, with males after adolescence fewer in number and consigned to some unspecified place outside society proper. Sex between women is a central part of gynosociety, since it fosters cooperation, says Cavan. Heterosexuality is not unknown, so women do have sex with the extra-societal male, but it is neither exclusive nor preferred. Because of sex segregation and the predominance of women, asexuality and what Calvin calls bisex and homosex are prevalent. What happened to this world? The patriarchal revolution that Davis envisages, resulting from women's poor selection of mates, comes for Cavan when the first woman relents and lets her son remain inside once he is grown, and then takes him as a lover, incest taboos not being in force in this world. With that first misstep, the utopian world of gynosocieties started to come crumbling down, with men eventually taking charge of women's sexuality and reproductive abilities and creating the world that we know all too well. Cavan thus reverses the judgments associated with 19th century evolutionary theories that posits women-dominated societies and unrestricted sexual encounters at the beginning of human society, and then triumphal progress towards a patriarchal society structure. Her tale has echoes in the Chicana feminist representations of the Aztec myth of Coyolxauhqui, Coyolxauhqui, the moon goddess. Coyolxauhqui tried to kill her mother, who is pregnant with Huitzilopochtli, the war god, but he bursts from his mother's womb, dismembers his sister, and flings her head into the sky where it becomes the moon. In the feminist telling, Coyolxauhqui is not a murderous daughter, but rather is making a valiant attempt to save the world from war, slavery, and imperialism, from the consequences of male domination. The newest addition to the genre of alternative creation myth comes from the novelist and Nobel Prize winner Doris Lessing, who tells the tale prompted, she says, by a scientific article arguing that the basic and primal human stock was probably female, with males a kind of cosmic afterthought. The story is framed by ruminations of a male historian in ancient Rome who tells us, in Rome now, a sect, the Christians, insists that the first female was brought forth from the body of a male. Very suspect stuff, I think. Some male invented that, and the exact opposite of the truth. In Lessing's imagined world, the first humans were the clefts, females who reproduced without males, impregnated by fertilizing winds or a wave that carried fertility in its substance. As in Davis's tale, there is no sex between women there. They mutilate, kill, or abandon the occasional malformed offspring, known as a monster, born with a clutch of protruding flesh there in front where they had smooth flesh, a neat slit, fringed with soft hair. But the abandoned squirts, as they come to be called, do not die. They are rescued by eagles and raised elsewhere. In Lessing's tale, the clefts and the squirts find one another, as they seemingly are destined to do. The squirts, who lack the knack of giving life, are tormented by the demands of their maleness and driven by powerful instincts, until they find clefts who, seeing their hunger, have sex with them and clean their huts to boot. In Lessing's telling, heterosexuality is inevitable. Eventually, the clefts can no longer reproduce without encountering the squirt's tubes, and the old ways die out. Again, the rest we know. Admittedly, this is all rather far-fetched, but why not imagine an alternative to heterosexual origins? Why not parthenogenesis or homosex? Since we do not know anything about sexual behavior at the beginning of human society, why should we assume that same-sex sexuality was taboo? Are there any hints that sex between women may have existed in the beginning? The problem is, of course, that creation myths and other stories that explain the way the world is mirror the societies of their creators, just as the tales I have just described are spun within a particular political context. So, it is not surprising that most of them take a heterosexual shape, as in the Adam and Eve version, with a god or some gods and a man and a woman and eventually a child. Still, the fact that it is women who give birth to children, and that the role of men in sexual intercourse is paternity, was not always understood, means that some stories give a starring role to a female figure. Take, for example, creation stories that feature a goddess in the beginning. There are scholars who argue that originally goddesses created and ruled the world, and that the emergence of god centered religions represented a kind of heavenly male revolution mirroring what went on in the material world. Thus, feminist scholar Marilyn Stone, in her 1976 book When God Was a Woman, unearths goddess religions of the ancient Mediterranean world and argues that the Bible represents a conspiracy to rewrite history and slander the goddesses, resulting as well in the increasing societal subordination of women. All that talk of honoring no other god referred, Stone argues, to the goddess whose primary symbol, the serpent, comes to play such a diabolical role in the biblical version of the fall of man and women. More dispassionate scholars agree that the stature of goddess declined over time, perhaps as men began to conquer rather than stand in awe of the forces of nature. So, what can we make of the history of goddess worship? At a time when the link between heterosexual intercourse and the birth of children was unknown, it would not be surprising for women to have been viewed as the creators of life. Mothers would also have the only evident connection to the children they bore. In such societies, both goddess worship and matrilineal descent would make sense. Whether such representations mean anything about the status of women, much less the possibility of female same sex sexuality, is another question altogether. Maria Gimbutos, an archaeologist who has written extensively about goddess worship, argues that the civilization of the goddess was a peaceful and egalitarian. In short, the kind of paradise that both Elizabeth Gould Davis and Susan Cavan depict. Needless to say, such a conclusion is controversial. Even advocates of the goddess as a victim of a patriarchal revolution most often point to her heterosexuality, for she tends to have a young male god, sometimes her son, as lover or husband, and that male figure, shades of Susan Cavan's account, takes over to become the primary deity. Still, it's worth noting that myths do not all feature a heterosexual version of creation. In Kamia, Native American origin tale, a white woman bears many children not conceived by a man. Another Native American creation myth, from the Hopi, describes nothing but water and two goddesses, both named Hruing Huti, in the beginning of the world. They lived in the ocean, one in the east and one in the west, and they created land between the seas. When the sun called attention to the fact that there were no living things on the new land, they made a bird fly over to view the land, then all sorts of animals, and finally a woman first, and then a man. Ancient Indian texts also include stories of births unconnected to heterosexuality. A common tale, according to scholar Ruth Vanita and Salim Kidwai, involves a deity providing some kind of magic food or drink that results in birth. In one case, King Suryamani drank the water intended for his wife and gave birth from his thigh. In another, two women spit what was meant for one and give birth to half a child each. Taking a different form, a story about Aruna, god of dawn, has him assuming the form of a woman to attend an all-female celebration where women dance naked. In his female body, he sleeps with two women and gives birth to a child by each. In a manner reminiscent of Merlin Stone, Indian feminist scholar Gita Thadani reads the classic Sanskrit text to argue that the existence of an older matriarchal society has been covered up, although hints can be discerned of dual feminine deities in the Rig Ved, 4000 to 1500 BCE. See Figure 1 for example of this kind of representation. Figure 1. An image of the dual feminine Devika Puram, city of the goddess, Tamil Nadu, 5th to 7th century CE, from Gita Thadani Sakyani, Lesbian Desire in Ancient and Modern India. In contrast to the emphasis on gods and goddesses as cohorts, dual feminine deities could be lovers, mothers, or sisters. Images such as the following suggest the possibility of same-sex eroticism. From the bosom of the mountain, desirous and content, two mares, like two bright cows, as mothers, licking, caressing, and kissing. In a Japanese tale, Ama no Uzume, the alarming heavenly female, makes sunlight return to the earth by coaxing the sun goddess Amaterasu out of her cave by revealing her breasts and lifting her skirt to just below her genitals. What if such stories reflect the existence of fluid sexualities? What if goddess-worshipping societies facilitated women's love for other women? Can we glean any hints of such a possibility? One imaginative tale is spun by novelist Anita Diamant, who creates from the Old Testament story of Dinah, daughter of Jacob, in the book of Genesis, a fascinating tale of love and lust. In Diamant's novel, The Red Tent, she seems to suggest a connection between goddess worship and indifference to men, if nothing more. Jacob, who worships the god who demands that all others be put aside, takes 4 sisters as wives. Zilpah, who is devoted to the Queen of the Heaven and sees herself as the keeper of the mysteries of the Red Tent, where women gather once a month to bleed, is the only one uninterested in sex with Jacob. She turns white when she learns that she is to be given to him. She puts off going to his bed and tells her niece, Dinah, that she considers it a duty and that she never expects to enjoy it. She bears 2 sons and never sleeps with Jacob again. The story embroiders the argument of Merlin Stone, for the women defend the old ways, and the great mother who goes by many names but who is in danger of being forgotten. In the Red Tent, women not only bleed together at the time of the new moon, they also initiate girls in menstruation for the first time by opening their wombs with an image of the goddess. The wives of Jacob contrast their ritual, which ensures that a girl's first blood goes back to the womb of Inanna, to the dust that formed the first man and the first woman, to the fate of women who worship the jealous god, who have set aside the opening, which is the sacred business of women, and permit men to display their daughters' bloody sheaths. It is only a story, of course. Cabin sets great store in tales of all-female societies in different places around the world. There are, of course, most famous of all, the Amazons. They come down to us as a nation of women warriors described by Achilles as the warring Amazons, women man-haters, who lived in the vicinity of the Black Sea in what is now Turkey. What fascinated the Greeks about them was their military prowess, and the fact that they lived without men, reportedly seeking out males in neighboring societies once a year in order to conceive children. If the Amazons bore sons, they either gave them to the men who fathered them, or shades of the clefts mutilated or killed them. Greek sources suggest that Amazons thrived during the Bronze Age, 3000 to 1200 BCE. Homer, in the first text to report on them, calls them the equal of men. Later texts mention a lost epic recounting the story of the Amazon queen, Panthesilia. Panthesile, okay. Fighting with Achilles, who kills her and then falls in love with, or in some versions has sex with, her corpse. Hesiod describes Hercules defeating the Amazons And Diodorus of Sicily, writing in the 1st century BCE, has Hercules slaughtering almost all the Amazons and then raping their commander, Melanippe, and giving Antiope, a princess, to Theseus as a reward. Theseus took Antiope back to Athens as his concubine, and when the remnants of the Amazon nation attacked Athens to rescue her, Antiope fought against them. Diodorus also tells of an Amazon named Thalestries, who approached Alexander the Great with a proposal that they together conceive a girl child. They made love and hunted lions for 13 days, but Thalestries died without giving birth to the super child sure to emerge from such a union. From the late 7th century BCE, the Amazons appear in Athenian art. For an example of a Greek statue, see Figure 2. Greek statue of an Amazon from Dietrich von Bohmer, Amazons in Greek art. Yeah. And then Herodotus, writing in the 5th century BCE, tells the most extensive tale about them. According to Herodotus, the Greeks defeated the Amazons in battle and sailed away with them as slaves. Somewhere in the Black Sea, the Amazons staged a successful revolt, but, not knowing how to sail, ran the ships aground. On land once again, the Amazons found horses, tamed them, and began to fight the local population of Scythian men. The Scythians, amazed to find that their enemies were women, decided to court rather than battle them, and in this they succeeded. The Amazons settled down with the Scythian men, but clung to their traditions of riding, hunting, and fighting. Later, in the 5th century BCE, Pseudo-Hippocrates reported that the Amazons cauterized the right breast of girls in infancy so that they would be better archers, and dislocated the joints of male children so that the male race might not conspire against the female race. The Amazons rode and fought and did not have sex until they killed 3 enemies. A slightly different story comes from the pen of a writer in the late 13th century called Justin, who has the Amazons settling near the Black Sea with their husbands, who were then killed off in battle. The women began to seek out men for the sole purpose of conceiving, murdering their sons, and burned off the right breasts of their daughters. Under their queens, Marpesia and Lampeto, they conquered much of Europe and Asia. Stories about Amazons, according to Cavan, can be found from northern Africa to eastern Europe to Central Asia to India, China, and Mongolia. Diodorus of Sicily claimed that, prior to the Amazons living around the Black Sea, there were warlike North African women who were greatly admired for their manly vigor. A society of women who burned off their breasts and remained virgins while they fought and took on male roles lived on an island and conquered the surrounding peoples. Under their queen, Myrina, they founded cities including Mytilene on Lesbos. These are the women known as the Libyan or Black Amazons. One recent study cites a slew of reports from around the world. Ibrahim ibn Jaqub, an Arab writer in the 10th century CE, reported on a city of Amazons in Central Europe. An Indian historian in the 12th century told of an 18th century king encountering an Amazon society. Chinese chronicles located Amazons near Tibet and on the east side of the Caspian Sea, and Marco Polo spun tales of an island of women in the Indian Ocean between India and East Africa. European explorers in the 16th century and beyond reported Amazons in Latin America and Africa, which suggests to Cavan that female-dominated societies survived for a long time in some places. A 16th century Spanish text describes an island called California, very close to the earthly paradise inhabited by black women, without a single man among them. In a 1967 book, tellingly titled Our Primitive Contemporaries, described the far-famed Dahomean Amazons as the shock troops of the army, the best disciplined and most redoubtable warriors. The British explorer Richard Burton witnessed the women soldiers in Dahomey who fought against the French in colonial wars at the end of the 19th century. The Amazon warriors were reportedly not allowed to marry or have children, but had courtesans available for sexual purposes. Stories reminiscent of those about the Amazons emerged in Tamil folk tales, still popular in rural India. Societies of women flourish in Aliyar- Aliyarasanimalai, a woman-centered ballad about the kingdom of Ali, the heroine of the tale. Although the story says nothing about sex between women in this all-female land, it does make clear that women were strong, able to fight, and uninterested in men. Arjuna, a prince and hero in the other tales in this story, falls helplessly in love with Ali and sets out to force her to marry him. She is, however, determined never to marry, and is guarded by women warriors and surrounded by women who administer the city, advise her, and serve as priests, executioners, hunters, and friends. Even her elephants are all female. Although Arjuna uses devious and magical powers to rape, impregnate, capture, and finally marry Ali, she eventually returns to her kingdom, where she teaches the son that she bears to take revenge on his father. Sanskrit texts, too, refer to an Amazonian kingdom known as Striraya, a matriarchal country where, according to the Kama Sutra, dildos are much employed. Note that in all of these stories, stretched across centuries, the most important characteristic of the Amazon is their military prowess, which links them to masculinity, a theme we shall encounter again and again. But what about sexuality? Most of the tales emphasize the Amazon's virginity in combination with their control of their own sexuality and their refusal to stick with one man. When they want to reproduce, they seek out a man and for the most part do not settle down with them. It is also worth noting that virginity can be assumed to refer to lack of sexual interaction with men. Fear of female-controlled and unrestrained sexuality is not very subcontext, and the conquering or taming of the Amazons reassures the men relating and absorbing the tales that all will be right in the end. Is there evidence that Amazons, whether in history or myth, were lovers of women? The ancient sources seem to be silent on the question, despite the knowledge of such possibilities. A strange little book published in 1972 that purports to pull together all the ancient sources on the Amazons in order to create a narrative of the rise and fall of the Libyan Amazons, followed by the fuller story of the Amazons of Asia Minor, speculate about the sexual practices. If, the author asserts, they did without men most of the time, we must confront our some of an erotic practice rarely if ever associated with them. He goes on. Since purity and celibacy are hardly to be credited to women so vitally conscious of their bodies, female homosexuality must be the explanation for the gratification of their impulses and for the success of their military operations. He has no evidence, but cannot picture successful warriors going without sex. So he imagines, away from combat, their concern would be with the suppleness of their muscles and the shape of the legs of the companion with whom they would bed that night. Others, less focused on Amazonian appreciation of a beautiful leg, offer bits and pieces of evidence. A German author who argues, Cavan-like, that Amazon societies were the remnant of original matriarchal societies trying their best to survive in an increasingly patriarchal world refers to the existence of vulva-shaped monuments in likely Amazon locations. According to Cavan, a passage from the 16th century explorer who traveled down the Amazon River observed, there are some Indian women who determine to remain chaste. They have no commerce with men in any manner, nor would they consent to, if even it, nor would they consent to it, even if refusal meant death. Each has a woman to serve her, to whom she says she is married, and they treat each other and speak with each other as man and wife. Such accounts connects with the phenomenon of gender crossing that we shall encounter later in Native American and other societies and ties it to same-sex sexuality. The only other reference I have found comes from Richard Burton, who says that the Amazons in Dahomey in the 19th century preferred the peculiarity of the 10th muse, a reference to Sappho and her assumed proclivities. Why, then, have Amazons come to have such an association with female same-sex love? Is it their sexual freedom and independence from men? For a moment, let us return to the wonderfully imagined portrayal of ancient Amazon society in novelist Erica Jong's Sappho's Leap. Sappho, about whom more later, meets up with the Amazons on the island of Crete, one of the places associated with goddess worship and prominence of women. Sappho, her loyal slave Praxinoa, and her trusted friend Iasope of the fables, begin to explore the island, only to look up at the sound of horses' hooves to see a one-breasted woman on a horseback wearing silver chainmail. She is Penthesilea, named after the great queen, and she and her companion warriors take the three prisoner. Iasope becomes their stud. Penthesilea explains that they rescue female infants exposed on hilltops from throughout the Greek world, but also capture men and give them babies, and that they have ways of giving birth only to girl babies. Sounding like Elizabeth Gould Davis or the 1970s lesbian feminist tract, Penthesilea announces that men are a different species and that the Amazons have no need for them. Praxinoa, who as a baby had herself been abandoned and taken into slavery, and who loved and had sex with Sappho, is enchanted with the Amazons and chooses to stay among them. When the Amazons discover Sappho's identity, they rejoice, for their goddess had promised that the great poet and singer would come to them. Antiope, the Amazon queen, welcomes Sappho with a feast and announces that the goddess had brought them together so that the singer from Lesbos could write a history of the Amazons that would counter all the slanders that had been told about them. Sappho is distraught, not knowing how to write on command, and is disgusted by the relentlessly rosy history the Amazons begin to recount to her. While she struggles to write what the queen has commanded, she finds that the young Amazons have discovered the sailors from her ship and are experiencing forbidden love and lust. When the maidens are taken prisoner by Antiope and sentenced to death, Sappho forges ahead with her epic of goodness and beauty in order to save the erring Amazon maidens. Eventually, Sappho succeeds in convincing the queen to let them all go, and, saying a sad farewell to Praxinoa and setting to sea once again, she learns from the refugee Amazons that their world was not all it seemed. In reality, the Amazons kill or abandon male infants, just as the Greek societies do with baby girls. Sappho wonders if everywhere peace and justice could exist between the sexes. She worries that everywhere men dominate women or women get even by dominating men, and that two sexes seem to be a recipe for grief and warfare. Her Amazon informant, infatuated at the moment with an Egyptian sailor, replies, "Then we should invent more sexes, just to confuse everyone. That will solve the problem. Let's have men with breasts and women with phalli." In this way, Jong makes the story of the Amazons reverberate with contemporary queer worlds of gender and sexual fluidity. Later, when Sappho pays a visit to Hades, she encounters the Amazon queen Antiope, who accuses her of corrupting the Amazons with her ideas of justice. Now they nurse their boys instead of throwing them to the wolves. They suckle their own doom, she says, sounding very much like Susan Cavan. It will come to no good. Their own sons will overthrow them. Sappho's Leap takes the ancient tales about the Amazons as a starting point, and what Jong creates from the 21st century perspective is a world in which sexuality is fluid. The Amazons are lovers of women, but the young maidens who run off with Sappho's crew also delight in men. In that sense, her depiction accords with what we know about the sensibility of the ancient Mediterranean world. That the Amazons lived mostly without men evoked images of independent sexuality and female power, something that, as we shall see, did not sit well with Athenian men. Scholars have treated the Amazon stories, alternatively as fact, as a reflection of the older goddess-worshipping societies and as a psychological projection of men's need to separate from their mothers. Although there is no historical evidence that the Amazons as an independent female society existed, despite graves of women buried with their weapons, the stories about them and the power of their image for women who loved women throughout the centuries tell us something important about the conceptions of women and women's sexuality. This history of Amazon tales and creation stories from around the world suggests that, notwithstanding the relative silence on the subject, female same sex love could have existed from the beginning. Think of the possibilities of the Talmudic tale of Lilith, Adam's first wife, a figure rehabilitated by Jewish feminists. A female demon of the night who possesses a threat of uncircumcised male infants and men sleeping alone in houses. The figure of Lilith came into Hebrew tradition from Mesopotamia. Lilith refuses to lie beneath Adam during sex, insisting that they were equals because both had been created by God from dust. Resisting Adam's attempts to overpower her, Lilith speaks the name of God and flies out of the garden and through the air to the Red Sea, a place populated by lascivious demons. Although Lilith's promiscuity there results in the birth of demons, and she later comes back to seduce Adam, what if that was not the only sexual misconduct in which she engaged? A less speculative possibility for the existence of female same-sex love in ancient tales can be found in Plato's telling of a myth that attributes to Aristophanes the Symposium. According to Aristophanes via Plato, human beings originally had 4 arms, 4 legs, 2 faces, and 2 sets of genitals. They were like 2 people glued back to back. Some were male, some were female, and some were mixed, both male and female. At some point, they annoyed Zeus, so he cut them in 2 to punish them. At first, they clung to their lost halves, paying no attention to eating, and when one half died, they sought out another of the same sex as the dead half. So Zeus took pity and invented sexual intercourse to assuage their longings. As a result, men feel desire for either a lost male or a lost female half, and likewise women are attracted to men, some to other women. Here, at last, is a tale that places love between women at the beginning. But of course, by the time Plato told his story, we were well into recorded history, and, as we shall see, the world in which he lived was well aware of love between women as well as love between men. The goddess of Greek mythology are not traditional wives and mothers. Hera alone, the wife of Zeus, is married, and she is hardly a model of contented domesticity. Artemis, the goddess worshipped by the Amazons, is a solitary hunter who shuns contact with men. She is a virgin in the Amazonian sense of her owning her sexuality, for stories about her reveal her erotic attachments to the nymphs who were her companions in the forest. Callisto, a beautiful nymph who was Artemis's favorite, caught the eye of Zeus, who knew she would not be interested in a man. So he disguised himself as Artemis, and Callisto responded to his advances until he gave himself away and had his way with her. But that Callisto had welcomed Artemis as a lover is telling. Aphrodite, too, the goddess of love and of Sappho, celebrates love-making of whatever kind as long as it brings mutual pleasure. So we can see in Greek mythology the reflection of a society knowledgeable about and open to diverse kinds of sexual desires. But these are all stories. Is there any evidence of how women might have lived and loved before recorded history? One possibility comes from the Bronze Age frescoes preserved by a volcanic eruption in 1625 BCE in a settlement called Akrotiri on an island in the Aegean Sea. Like other representations from Minoan Crete, long known for the prominence of women, the wall paintings give centrality to female figures depicted in them in different age groups marked by size and costume and hairstyle. Women are also associated in the paintings with the cultivation and use of saffron, which has important medicinal qualities, particularly for eyesight. The markings of the eyes seem to suggest that females and the youngest boy child had clear eyesight, whereas the other male figures did not. One scholar interprets these frescoes in a highly speculative way as depicting a homosocial world in which women had high status, attended to their bodies and those of the children, and engaged in initiatory practices that may have involved homoeroticism, although there is no depiction of anything we would call sexual. It is a vision of a world in which women's connection to plants and healing and their centrality in the community meant that they were valued rather than dominated, and in which their communal rituals may have involved erotic elements so common in initiations. A final way to think about the earliest societies is to look at societies with subsistence economies, social structures based on kinship and no formal state structure, assuming that there may be some relationship between the form of such societies and attitudes about sexuality. What can we learn about love between women in kinship structured societies? Not much, as it turns out. We know a great deal about male same sex behavior, but precious little about that of females. Anthropologist Evelyn Blackwood argues that sexual relations between women in societies based on kinship groups are shaped by women's economic contributions and social status. Among the Azande in Africa, for example, wives control the produce from plots of land they receive from their husbands, and sometimes, after fulfilling their wifely responsibilities, form sexual relationships with other women, often co-wives. They may even have partaken in a ritual that formed a permanent bond with domestic and trade consequences for the community as a whole. A ritual practice known as Bagburu marked intimate ties between married women and could be followed by lovemaking. Relationships among co-wives may have existed in other polygynous African societies, including the Nupe, the Hausa, and the Nyakyusa. In other kinship-based societies, childhood and adolescent same-sex sexuality was acceptable, sometimes as part of initiation rituals. In Kung San society in northern Africa, girls took part in sexual play with one another. In Central Australia, Aranda girls cross cousins Aranda girl cross cousins, who would, by the custom of kinship, later become sisters in law, had sex using an artificial penis, and even when grown, they might have sex by tickling the clitoris with the finger, and then engaging in tribadism. Initiation schools for adolescent girls in Dahomey taught exercises to thicken the genitals, which might have led to sexual activity that did not earn reproach. Where sexuality is valued rather than repressed, sex play among children, whether heterosexual or same sex, does not seem to be a problem. What this scant evidence suggests, aside from the fact that male anthropologists have tended not to be interested in or have access to women, is that there is no good reason to assume that the earliest human societies have forbidden or even had negative ideas about sex between women. We can never know what really happened in the beginning, but what all these stories, myths from early civilization, as well as contemporary imaginings tell us is that thinking about sexuality at the origins of human society is profoundly shaped by the social and political context of the spinners of the tale. We shall see that goddesses and Amazons like Sappho thread their way through the centuries of Sapphistries, suggesting how important imagined beginnings have been. And why not imagine alternatives to what Adrian Rich called compulsory heterosexuality? Here is a fanciful origin tale. In the beginning, the great goddess gave birth to everything living, all the flowers and trees and plants, all the fish and birds and insects, all of the animals that swim or fly or crawl or walk. To some, they gave their most precious gift, the ability to give birth to begin like themselves, to beings like themselves. To others, they gave a supporting role. Each being they created had a special part to play in the world, and none was meant to rule over all others. Among all the richness of the world, they created people. Although they differed a bit from one another in color and hair texture and size, they came with various configurations of body parts. Their differences were less important than their similarities. They lived on land and breathed air. They took a long time to reproduce and become self-sufficient, and they had a great capacity for sexual pleasure, a gift that goddesses had bestowed on them. They found that they needed to eat to sustain themselves in the world that the goddess had created, and they honored the goddess by creating beautiful things and inventing fanciful tales and making pleasure in diverse ways with their bodies. And every time they created beauty or understanding or pleasure, of whatever kind, the goddess smiled. And that is where the myth will end, because we know too well what happened, even if we do not know why. Why should sex between women not have existed at the beginning? That is the question we need to ask, even if we can never find evidence that it did, for asking opens up the possibility of viewing differently what we do know about the past. Okay, that's the end of chapter 2. No, I'm not going to start chapter 3 because it's like 20 pages. And that's like the entirety of what I've just read. I don't really feel up to reading for like another hour and 15 minutes. Since we're live, any of you guys have any questions, comments, thoughts, concerns, things to say to me, complaints? I don't know. Like, since there's people here, I feel like sticking around talking to you. What's up? Nobody has anything to say? Okay. Well, in that case, I guess I'm going to end the stream. Sorry. Thanks for everyone who tuned in. I'm going to be doing this semi-regularly now, at least like 2 or 3 times a week. I have a whole bunch of other books. Oh, let me get you and show my other books. So I kind of wanted to do this in some kind of chronological order, which is why I started with this book. I'm kind of actually disappointed. It says it starts in 40,000 BCE. I thought I was going to talk about like frescoes and sculptures and shit. But it mostly like theorized or hypothesized what could have been. Either way, it was interesting. So this book, which is like a global history, I thought that was like a good book to start with. Then after that, I'm going to read these 3 books. I think I'm going to read this one next. Lesbian Psychologies, Explorations and Challenges. This is from 1987. So it's by like a collective, the members of the Boston Lesbian Psychologies Collective, which is like this list of women. But then it's like a collection of essays, which are by a bunch of other different women. So I guess they like edited it and stuff. It's really interesting. So like there's like sections, and within the sections there's chapters. The first section is identity. The second section is relationships. The third section is family. The fourth section is therapies, and the fifth section is communities. They all look super interesting. I can definitely imagine myself sitting down and reading 1 or 2 essays at a time. Onto YouTube. Yep. And the third book I'm going to read, which is not like lesbian specifically, it's more like radfem, but whatever. It's called The Politics of Reality, Essays in Feminist Theory by Marilyn Frye. It's pretty short. It's like only like 175 pages. So it's like a collection of essays, but the last essay, Lesbian Feminism and the Gay Rights Movement, Another View of Male Supremacy and Other Separatism. So it's kind of lesbian related, but whatever. And then this book, Eating Fire, My Life as a Lesbian Avenger by Kelly Cogswell, is about I think she's Canadian. About a Canadian radfem lesbian who was a lesbian avenger. So these are the books I'm starting with. Under this video, I'm going to put an Amazon wish list, which has like 38 books that are like lesbian. There's a few that are like Politics of Reality that are like not like specifically lesbian, but like radical feminist women-centered stuff. So if you want to buy me some more books, I will read them. Yeah, I've been dealing with a lot of stuff and I've been really tired and not really had like the energy or time to do things, or when I've tried to do things, I've had like technical difficulties. Like if I had a person who like helped me like editing and recording videos and stuff, I'd probably be able to put a lot more content. But anyway, so I wanted to read lesbian books for like a long time, and I actually was on Clubhouse, started doing this on Clubhouse, but it's really small. By the way, if you want an invitation to Clubhouse, hit me up. yeah, so I was like, I want to make it accessible to people, especially some of these books, like lesbian psychologies. I can't find where to buy it. I looked out and found it in a gay bookshop, but it's out of print now, and you can't find it anymore. A couple of the books on my wish list, like you can get them on Amazon if you buy used copies, but they're out of print. Like I don't care. I want a copy of the book. I don't care if it's used. And there's a few other books that I want that I found them, but they're like $100 a copy because like they're out of print. So I basically want to make stuff accessible to people. And like that's why I thought of turning this into a podcast. People can just like, go for a run or in the car, just like listen to me reading some like lesbian literature. You don't have to listen to the whole thing, you could just like pick a chapter you like and listen to that. So yeah, so check out my wish list that I'm going to put in the description and buy me some books. And then I'm going to read them. I'm not sure how long I'm going to be doing this, like at least for a couple months. Hopefully for like about a year I'll be able to do this. Yeah. Happy Lesbian Visibility Day. I feel a bit strange about this book. It's not what I expected really, but it's interesting. Yes, spin effects does still exist. Is that what this book is? No, it's not. Yeah. I'm not sure. Some of the books I want are really hard to find. I might have to like call women's bookstores and see if they have like a copy kicking around somewhere. Like there's one book called Eden Built by Eves, which is about like women's lands, or maybe specifically Michigan Women's Music Festival. I really want to read it, and I'm having trouble finding a copy of it. Anyway, so yeah, gonna be reading lesbian stuff, or like some radical feminist stuff, mostly lesbian stuff, mostly lesbian history and lesbian theory. I have like a handful of lesbian history books I want to read. 2 of them that are Canadian that I'm very happy. No, 3 that are Canadian that I'm very happy. The House Built by Jill, and I mean whatever, I can't remember the other names, but and then like what was mentioned at the beginning of this book was the Lillian Faderman Beyond the Love of Men, which I've been reading. This is how this all got started. I've had this book for like a long time. It's like pretty huge. It's like the gay revolution. I thought it was like more global, but it's very American centric, which is like kind of annoying and disappointing, but it's very interesting anyway. I'm on chapter 24. It's like page 450 or something. I've been reading it. First, I was reading it on Clubhouse, but it was kind of disappointing when like one person would tune in or tune out. Then I was reading it on Instagram, which was like slightly better, but the nature of Instagram is not that you sit around for an hour listening to somebody read. But then I felt weird about doing it on YouTube because I'm like more than halfway through the book. But anyway, it's by Lillian Faderman, and I like her writing style. I find it very comfortable to read her writing out loud. So I definitely want to get her, because she's a lesbian historian. I want to get her other books. So they're on my reading list, on my wish list. So if you want to buy them for me, I'll read them. But again, most of them are really American centric. Beyond the Love of Men, I don't think is American centric, but I'm kind of like, I don't know. The book's good, she's good, whatever, but I'm just kind of like enough of America at some point, So yeah, that's what's up with me. Yeah, so I'm gonna leave stuff up. Let me know about the audio. I guess I'll hear it after myself, but I think I have a good mic now, because I had one like this before and it broke, but somebody gave me this. Thanks, person who gave me this. I can adjust the gain and stuff if it's too quiet. Okay, I haven't heard of this book, Women's Encyclopedia Myths and Secrets. Okay. Cool. I'm going to add that to my wish list. Yeah. So basically, I just want to get a bunch of like lesbian history, lesbian theory. Yeah, Barbara Walker, yeah. Like I know of the author, so I guess I would have found the book eventually. My wish list is already huge, like 30 books. I'd be surprised if I get through. But a lot of these are pretty small. Like this one is like 150 pages. Even this one, the Sapphistries. How many pages is it? Like less than 300? Like, they're not very big books. The conclusion starts at page 227 of Sapphistries, and we just got to page 25. I can't do math, but that's like 7 more readings. So in like 2 weeks, I should be done this book. If I do like 3 or 4 readings a week. So look out on Instagram. I'm gonna say when I'm doing the stuff, like when I'm planning to do stuff, and which books I'm reading next. Also, I'm so out of the loop with YouTube. I'm gonna do the thing where you like schedule readings. So maybe this Thursday I'll do my next reading. Yeah, and also like this, I'm just gonna keep reading it. I know Mary Daly, right? But she's really accessible. I'm trying to get less accessible stuff. I will eventually read Mary Daly, but I'm trying to read like the less accessible stuff for now. Even the Kelly, was it Cosborn? Kelly Cogswell. It's pretty accessible, so maybe I'll decide not to read it on this, but I probably will. Just because somebody told me like, now what we're kind of doing, lesbians, is like we kind of have to like restart a grassroots movement, and they were kind of like read this book to kind of understand what you should and shouldn't do, and I was like, okay, so it seems like something worth doing. But yeah, this book I'm gonna keep reading on Instagram just because like I want to finish it. So if you want to hear me read it, I usually read it at some time between 8 p.m. and midnight Eastern Central Time. Like every 2 or 3 days. Yeah. And the chapters are pretty like topic specific, and they'll mention people who were in other chapters, but like you can understand them without having read the rest of the book. I think I also might do a reading of this book on just like the chapters or subsections about like lesbians. Like there's one section about lesbians in the military bringing a court case. There's a section about lesbian feminists and the radical lesbians splitting off from like the Gay Liberation Front and stuff like that. There was a subsection about like in the family values chapter about a lesbian couple who one of them had an accident in the 80s and the other one couldn't get like guardianship of her, even though she was like a freaking physiotherapist who wanted to help her with like her rehabilitation. Anyway, so I might read like the lesbian sections of this book onto YouTube one day. And then yeah, I want to read thank you, Toss, for randomly mentioning these people I've never heard. Yeah. I'm actually, I don't know. When I bought this book, I didn't realize it was published in 2009. I thought it was more of like, I don't know. It seems like there's a lot of like basically like opinions of the author in it. I mean, obviously every book will have that, but like I thought it would be more like dry, like in this year this thing happened, in this year we have like a statue of this or whatever, like more of like a dry, like fact based history. I mean, maybe it's just the first chapter that's like that, but just there's already parts of it that are like screaming queer theory at me, and that makes me concerned. But we'll see. I mean, I'm super picky, so probably most things wouldn't conform to what I want, except for second wave stuff. So, yeah. Thanks for people who recommended books. Thanks for people who tuned in. I'm going to wrap up the video and drop my Amazon wishlist underneath. So if you want to buy me some books for me to read or just to have, because realistically, I'm probably not going to get to read like 40 books on YouTube in the next year, but we'll see. Especially because like I'm working and stuff. I'm doing a lot of stuff. Yeah. Also I have a Patreon, which full disclosure is pretty dead. I haven't put anything up onto it in like a year. But if you want to support me, you can do that. I'm just like I'm opening tabs and Googling the things that Toss is suggesting so that I can Oh, also, I'm on Goodreads. If any of you are on Goodreads, you can follow me. I should put my Goodreads I'll put a link to my Goodreads account under the video. There you can follow like what books am I reading if I'm not reading them like on YouTube. What books am I reading, and what books I want to read. Like this person who's recommending a bunch of books. Like if we were friends on Goodreads, you could like send me the recommendations or whatever. So yeah, I don't know how many people use Goodreads, but I was super obsessed with it as a teenager. Um, it was like my main social media for a couple years. Anyway, you guys don't seem very talkative, so I guess I better wrap this up. Anybody have any complaints or thoughts before I wrap things up? I might try and do this at like a very regular times people can tune in, like Mondays and Thursdays at like 8 p.m. or something. But it really depends on my work schedule. Yeah, honestly, this is like low effort, like low brain power for me. And like since I'm so like dead all the time, this is like the most I can muster. Also, like the podcast thing, like either it's an issue of people after we make the videos don't want their face or their name to be public, which like obviously if I might just do the podcast again and force everyone to be anonymous, like have a pseudonym and like just a picture and no face. Maybe that's the best way to go about it. Um, or like people don't want to do live, so I record it, and then my computer is like so small that I can't open the video to like edit it or anything, or even upload it. So yeah, maybe for the podcast I should do purely audio based. I'm not sure. Honestly, like I'm doing so many things and I'm so tired. I haven't put much thought into it, but this seems like so straightforward and so easy. Just like open a freaking book and read it. Try not to stumble on my words too much. Kind of impressed with how I did today, especially with the Aztec names. Like fuck. Like what language is that? Nahuatl? It's like so freaking confusing with like the X's and the L's and the T's all next to each other. I don't fucking anyway. Yeah. I don't know. I post on Instagram a fair amount now, but I'm pretty intermittent with that too. Sometimes also I'm just like sick of social media, you know? Um but I'm doing like advocacy work in Canada. Um like if you know any Canadian detransitioners, send them my way. That's most of what I spend my time doing now. Uh yeah. Thanks about the hair. People on Instagram keep saying that too. I have like a mullet right now. I think I might like shave the top so it's like a literal actual mullet because this is driving me crazy and I can't stand it anymore and it's like in my face all the time. And when I'm at work, I have to like tie it up and it's like super fucking annoying. I don't know about JY. The last I heard about JY was like they had gotten a vaginoplasty and were like posting pictures on Twitter, which is like, you know, disturbing and unnecessary. Yeah. So yeah. Um, yo, that is the other way to get good books is old lesbians or old rad femmes giving away their books. There was one point when I was like 20 that I knew of somebody doing that, but I lived far away from them and I was like living in a dorm and didn't have space. Like I feel so dumb now. I should have like taken advantage and been like, give me all your fucking books. Uh toss. Email me, gnccentric one word at gmail.com. I will definitely take your books off your hands if you don't want them. You see my bookshelf? Okay, that shelf on the very top is all like fantasy sci-fi stuff. This here is like a mixture of like horrific liberal feminist garbage and radfem stuff. And then this, why is it so like backwards? This is all comic books. And then this is like printer paper and coloring books and stuff. So I'm happy to reorganize the whole thing and fill the whole thing with lesbian stuff. Um, yeah. Yeah. basically I just want to make second wave stuff as accessible as possible. And I thought like starting off with lesbian history made sense. We'll see what happens in the next chapter of this book. It's only 8. Maybe I'll take a break and like in half an hour come back and live stream and read the next chapter. Although 20 pages, that's like 2 hours. Actually, never mind. I can't because I have to go to sleep because I have to be at work at 6. But yeah, I'm planning to do about 2-hour readings each time, depending. That's what I've been doing with the Lillian Faderman book. Toss, I'm so glad you dropped by to recommend these books for me. Oh yeah, also if you're on Goodreads, like follow me and tell me who you are, and then we can just talk there. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I feel bad for not making more content and not, posting more gender critical stuff and more detrans to sister stuff and whatever. But it's like, no, dude, it's actually horrific liberal feminist. Let me show you the stuff. I'm open to doing podcasts with friends, but it's just the logistics. Like, we're in different time zones. Some people want to be anonymous. Some people don't want to be anonymous. Some people want to do it live. Some people don't want to do it live. It's just like so fucking complicated. So this is a book by Imogen Binney called Nevada. Imogen Binney is a trans woman. Like, the first opening of this book is like, here, let me read it to you so you can be horrified. This was given to me for free when I was 16 by a trans woman at like a trans youth support group. She's choking me. She's really in there, fingers on my cartilage, smashing my trachea, and I can't breathe, Maria thinks. She truly can't breathe, but she can't bring herself to care. There was a time in her life when this was new, and when she was at least as hot for being choked as Steph was for choking her. But now they'd got an apartment together, a cat, good lighting, and Maria can't even muster a shiver. She acts like she's into it. She's thrashing, hands at Steph's wrists, pulling. Not that hard, although Steph is probably stronger than Maria, so it's not like Maria could physically make Steph stop if this were for real. And she is turned on. She's pressed up hard against Maria's leg. Then one of her hands is on Maria's throat, at her crotch, and Steph is getting herself off. That's the first page. Isn't that a beautiful thing to give to teenage lesbian? Especially a dysphoric person. This, excluded, by Julia Sereno, the feminist. Look at all these fucking tabs and shit. You can see where I got like halfway through and got sick of putting tabs. Like fuck. Like I studied this stuff. I was like, this was like a Bible to me. I think this is signed. Yeah, look. See, best wishes, Julia. Is this also signed? No, a Whipping Girl, just like her early, I think, no, her next book or early, whatever. One of them came first. All of these books that I have purchased, I got at Glad Day Bookstore in Toronto. Even this, which is like very second wavy. Apparently they have a bunch of old second wave stuff, but they don't sell it because, it's all queer shit now. So yeah, that's my horrific lib fem stuff. I have some other stuff. I don't know where it is. Might have got rid of it. I feel like I should get rid of these too, but like in a way, I feel like at some point I'm going to try and reread these horrible books with like a rad feminalysis and think about like how it affected me as a young person to read these books. Like how it affected my perception of sexuality and gender and stuff. Yeah, anyway, whatever. Maybe I should just burn them. Anyway. Yeah. Anybody have any other questions or anything? How did you guys find this? My rad fem books. Okay, well, I have these. And then I have some other like general random stuff that I found that is like, I don't think I'm going to read it, but I'll show it to you. Like, I'm not going to read it on YouTube, I mean. So this is Orlando by Virginia Woolf. I had it on my wish list, and Karina Cohn. Fox. Karina Cohn, who's like a gender apathetic, gender critical trans woman who I'm like friends with now on Clubhouse. We like host rooms together on Clubhouse. She bought it for me. She's awesome. She also bought me the Kelly Cogswell thing. I have this young book. Like it's not rad femme, but it seems to me relevant to like the gender stuff that's going on, so I want to read it. Chomsky, which my girlfriend gave me. The Architecture of Language, again, seems relevant to the gender stuff that's going on, but it's not rad femme, obviously. Then I have John Stuart Mill and Harriet Taylor Mill, Essays on Sex Equality. This is more, I wouldn't say rad femme exactly, but like, we're kind of, I don't know, kind of more of an old school perspective on things that I thought it might be interesting to find. This, like, you see how cheap this was? This is like the stuff at Glady that they're trying to get rid of because nobody wants actual like lesbian stuff anymore. It's called Valley of the Amazons. It's like some lesbian romance novel. You can see the original price here was like $12, and then they were selling it for like $6, $7, whatever. Anyway. Yeah. Yeah, that's my books. I don't have that many right now, but that's why I have a wish list so you can buy them for me. Okay, what do people say? Yeah, I'm really excited. I've read like one or two of the essays in here. I'm really excited to read this. This seems to me like so fucking relevant to what the fuck is going on with the lesbian community right now. Also lesbian heresy, but I don't think I'm gonna get into like Sheila Jeffries stuff is really accessible because you can just download it as PDFs, and also it's controversial because of like the political lesbian thing. Like honestly, with this like series of book readings, I kind of don't give a shit about that. Like if it's offensive or upsetting or what, like it's a fucking book, man. It's like it's meant to be potentially, even like she was mentioning Rich, right? The first thing I ever read on Clubhouse was compulsory heterosexuality. And the concept of the lesbian continuum, it's almost in a way similar to what the queer community is doing now, of like, well, you can like identify with like lesbianism even if you're not a lesbian. Like in a way that's problematic, right? But like it's still worth reading it and understanding what she's talking about and like challenging yourself to think in that way, or why you do or don't disagree with it, right? So like I don't know. Anyway, yeah, I don't know what I was saying, but yeah, I'm gonna read a bunch of stuff. Things that are like easily accessible as PDFs right now, I'm probably not gonna read. Like gynecology, I think is really cool. I want to read it for myself, but I don't think I'm gonna read it. Like this is philosophy. I want to get into like kind of philosophy stuff. It's like gynecology is philosophy, but like I said, I'm not gonna read things that are like super easily accessible. Like I'm actually gonna try to find things that are really inaccessible and read those first. Like this book, which is like super inaccessible. Oh, the CEO of Giggle. She's cool. I've tried using that app. I don't know. There's parts of it that are interesting, but I think honestly the biggest problem with that app is that there's not enough people on it. Like I think it would be really cool if like every single rad femme downloaded Giggle and was on there. Then we could make it like our place. Just because of like the way the app is designed. You can like be super anonymous. Um, yeah. Yeah. Okie doke. It's been almost 2 hours, guys. I'm gonna go. I have to put my laundry in the dryer. And well, you're about to join Giggle? Yeah, do it, man. Like, join Giggle. I'm not saying don't use it, but I'm just saying, like, it's interesting, but it could be, like, a lot better if there's more people on it. Yeah, it's like a female-only app. It's interesting. It's kind of, I think there's a dating section in it, but it's more, like, social. So you can, there's, like categories, like, business, or like sexuality or something. And in each category, you create your own profile that's different from everything else. So like in one profile, you could be like your real name, making business connections. And in like another section, like the sexuality section, you could be like anonymous, talking about like lesbian erasure and stuff without like getting in trouble, like the connection of the two. Um, and I don't know if it's geography based or not, but anyway, it's an interesting app. I've tried it. I like it. Um, but it's just it doesn't have enough people on it, basically. Um, yeah, yeah. I think it's only for cell phones, unfortunately. But Toss, if you're on Goodreads, let's hook up there. um, maybe tomorrow night I'll read another chapter of this book. If not tomorrow, then Thursday. And I think it's going to typically be around 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time because I work at 6 a.m. So I need to like be in bed unconscious by 10 p.m. So, but like, who the fuck knows with work? Soon they'll probably put me on like 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. I kind of hate my job. I really hate my job. If anybody wants to give me like $1,000 a month on Patreon, I can quit my job. Yeah. Yeah. Let's say tomorrow night at 6 p.m. I'll do this again. So if you guys tune in tomorrow night at 6 p.m., I'm going to read Sapphistries, A Global History of Love Between Women. Chapter 3, Ancient Worlds, 3,500 BCE to 800 CE. It starts off with a poem by Sappho. So I guess that's the Greek and Roman chapter that she mentioned in the introduction. Yeah. And once I'm done this book, which I think should be like in the next 2 weeks, I'm going to start on lesbian psychologies. Yeah. Okay, I've been saying that I'm going to go for like half an hour and I'm not going. I also wanted to do meetups. Like, I had planned meetups and then fucking COVID happened, guys. So sad. I also wanted to go to New York City to do a meetup. Like, I have a car and a license now. But because of, like, COVID, I can't fucking go to New York and do a meetup, which is, like, sad and annoying. Yeah. Anyway, I was, like, spread my books out everywhere. I can't believe so many, like, gender-critical people are, like, anti-vaxxers and anti-maskers and stuff. What is up with that? Anybody else feel this? You know what I'm saying? What the fuck is going on with that? Well, I had like a lesbian social group that I was running in Toronto. Um, that's kind of dissolved recently. So I kind of wanted to restart some kind of underground lesbian group thing in like Southern Ontario again. Like just like social, just like normal regular lesbians who are not into queer theory. Um, um, just like for them to hang out and meet each other basically. In like a safe anonymous way. Like anonymous as in like nothing publicly findable that you're joining this group. Um, I want to do that, but also I wanted to do detrans meetups. I actually kind of had like a vague plan to drive to like different cities in Canada and start kind of like detrans um support groups in real life and then like kind of be there for like one or two meetings and then leave and like leave it in their hands kind of a thing. But that seems unrealistic now, I'm not sure. Especially now with a job, like I don't know. I don't know. Just like I've also seen there's like a lot of gender critical stuff that are like people who are like generally anti-vaxxers even before COVID, and I'm like, what the fuck? How come they're always the ones that are like, we need to pay attention to the science and the facts and blah, blah, blah. And then they're like promoting pseudoscience. Kind of fucking, I don't know. Could like, I could soliloquize. I don't know. I mean, part of being like, well, yeah, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, part of being like a gender critical person or a rad femme or whatever is not to equate the two, because they're obviously different at this point. It's history. Yeah, a lot of GC people do read alternative sources, but I think part of it is that you're kind of like the odd one out, the one who has like the perspective that nobody else has, that you're like enlightened in a way that the rest of the people aren't, which is like very similar, like psychologically, to like people who buy into conspiracy theories. I think that's part of it. Yeah. I don't know. I can't wait till everybody is like vaccinated and then we can like kind of semi go back to like a somewhat normal life. Which is not going to happen in Canada anytime soon. Like, fuck. I literally, when this shit all started, I thought that the US was going to turn into like a fucking zombie apocalypse and that everywhere else would be like, well, not everywhere else, but like Canada and like more like Western European countries would be like kind of fine. But now it's like the opposite because the US did like fucking nothing to like combat COVID. All they're doing now is like fucking going nuts with the vaccines. I know. I know. Why, Kate Spell? Yeah, no, I don't know. It's sad. Anyway, I didn't start this video so we could talk about COVID. Well, my audio thing shows that like it's really quiet. Does this make a difference? It keeps showing that it's very quiet. But it's just so crazy to me. Like I was driving my friend to a university today and like a whole campus, like dozens of buildings, and they're all fucking empty. Like how many places are like that like they built these buildings, people could like congregate in person, and they've been empty for like over a year, and it doesn't look like in the near future things are going to go back to normal. It's like kind of mind-boggling to me how crazy all this stuff is. Yeah. What is that in reference to, Adela? I'm gonna just keep hanging out with you guys because if you guys are talking to me, so whatever. Popeyes. I know. I'm living the life, guys. I've just been like so tired. I don't know though. I think there's like much more of a reason to be like anti-psych meds or anti-birth control, where there's like huge swaths of evidence that those things fuck people up, rather than anti-vax, where there's like theories and like random anecdotal shit about how bad they are. I find it very bizarre. Like there's just so many other things that I think that you can be critical of with like a lot more evidence than vaccines. Like even the anti-vax thing. You guys know how that started? It was like in the UK, they had some kind of a shot that was like 3 vaccines in one for little kids, like measles, mumps and rubella. I don't fucking know. Some vaccine, right? And the other companies that made the vaccines independently, like not the 3-in-1, were like going out of business almost because of this 3-in-1 vaccine. And so they like paid this doctor hundreds of thousands of pounds to like go to conferences and write articles and all kinds of stuff about how this 3-in-1 vaccine is giving kids autism or some crazy shit, which like had no scientific basis. It was like opinion pieces, right? And this guy like retired and stuff, and he's still, I think, getting paid by this pharma companies. Like it's like the whole thing is a fucking game. It's not like there's like people who are like know the truth and people who don't know the truth. It's just like everything is like kind of bullshit. I don't know. No, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying like yeah, I know. I'm not saying the pharma companies are like miracle cure workers or something. I also find it so strange, like people now like praising like Johnson and Johnson, for example, or like AstraZeneca and Moderna and stuff. These are the same companies that have like life-saving cancer drugs that they will like force people to pay like $60,000 a year to have these cancer drugs when it doesn't cost that much to make them. Or the same companies that are charging like, what is it in the US, like $200 for an EpiPen? So like these companies have become kind of like heroes to people because of the COVID vaccine, but actually they're like fucking like destructive, horrific medical industry, like profiting off of like in a kind of grotesque way, like extremely exploiting these people's desperation to like live. I find it very disturbing. Well, maybe it's not about arguing with people. Maybe you just present what you believe and why you believe that and let people make up their own minds. I don't know. I thought once you have COVID though, you can't really be cured from it. That like you can have it and you can get sick again. It's not like some other viruses where like once you have it and you like get past it that you can't catch it again. I don't know. It's all very concerning to me. Like I have family that's died of COVID and family that caught COVID and survived. I just feel like on some level, like to me the most like unignorable thing is that like you could be a vector of contagion that kills other people, and that's like you have some kind of responsibility to not do that, whether that's like isolating to like an extreme degree as much as possible or like getting the vaccine or something. Like it's not even about you, it's about like your effect on the people around you, whether you intend it or not. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, anybody else want to talk about anything else? I forgot how chill it was to do live streams. Look, it's Mama. Mama! Oh my god. Oh, I'm sorry, Moan. Hormoning. Are you like Swedish or something? What is that name? It's just some pseudonym. That sounds horrible, Toss. I hope your son is like okay. What? I'll be right back if you get my cat food. Mama. Come here. There you go. Oh my god, guys. Look at this thing that I printed out and read like one chapter of like a couple years ago. Gender Trouble by Judith Butler. I should probably burn that. Literally the reason I haven't got rid of it is because I feel bad that I wasted paper printing it. But it's like, it's Judith Butler. Like I have an iPad, so I can read stuff on my iPad, but I just like kind of hate reading stuff a long time on. That's another reason why I want you guys to buy me books so I can read them on paper. Like one, so that I have like a library of rad fem and lesbian feminist stuff, like on paper, so I could like lend it to friends and stuff, and like have it when those things have been out of print for like 50 years that I can like have a copy, you know. But also just I prefer paper books. I don't know. Oh, okay. I've been in multiple radfem book clubs, and they always like, maybe it's because the numbers are too small, but they always like kind of dissolve or devolve over time. Where like we'll all read the same book and talk about it like once or twice, and then after that, like it'll just be like less and less people actually read the books. I had some people in the city where I live contact me and say they wanted me to join their lesbian book club. But it's like, I mean, I don't know. I kind of had, my friend of mine kind of had the idea that this could be like a book club kind of thing where like, because originally when I did it on Clubhouse, it would be like I'd read a chapter and then I would sit around, because Clubhouse is like an audio-based app where other people can talk to you, kind of like a Discord channel or something. And like originally I would like read a chapter, or like when I read like Compulsory Heterosexuality, and like two or three people would be there and we'd like just like talk about it. What do we think? Like what did it remind us of? That kind of thing. So it was kind of like a book club thing. But like people didn't have to like take the time to read the book ahead of time because we all like kind of read it together in the moment. So this could become something like that eventually. I mean, like even now, sitting around talking, we could be talking about the book. I was like really surprised. First of all, because I thought this person was like, what did this person? They were women's studies, right? That's why. I thought it would be more like historian-esque. But it seems more I don't know. Gosh, I can't remember any words now. But it seems very much like musings and thoughts and feelings about this topic rather than like concrete evidence of what we do and don't know. But again, it could just be that chapter. It could just be that's how she starts off because we don't know anything at that point. But I was really surprised at talking about like killing the baby boys and mutilating the baby boys or whatever without any like outright condemnation or anything. I mean, I guess she's pretty good at like objectively saying like this is what some people have thought, but this is what some people had an idea about without like getting emotional about it. Yeah, true. Lou, are you on Goodreads? Exactly, Kate. Okay, so look me up on Goodreads. I'm gonna put my a link to my Goodreads profile in the description of this video if you can't find me. I don't think I'm GNC centric. I think I'm Benji Dyke on Goodreads. If we could turn this kind of into a book club. Instead of reading 2 hours at a time, we'll just read one chapter. and talk with whoever's here. What do you guys think of that? Maybe it's not so relevant for the lesbian history, though. Maybe that's more of a rad femme theory, or I'm not sure. What do you guys think? We could have like a parallel Goodreads account and book club. Okay, people like it. Okay, let's do that then. I mean, next time, the next chapter I think is 25 pages. Let me see. So we just ended at page 25, and the next chapter starts at page 42. So like 18 pages. That's going to be like, based on my current out loud reading times. Oh, you're in New Zealand? Fuck, man. Usually I don't get many Australians or New Zealanders on these things because like time zones. Dude, Romania. Whenever I hear of like Romania or Serbia, I always think about sex trafficking. I have some friends who are Serbian, like rad femmes. I mean, obviously it's not the same country, but I mean, like when I hear those two the names of those two countries, is what I think of. Oh, I can edit the description right now. Okay, let me put my. I'm gonna add my wish list right now. It snowed here a few days ago. Like in like a huge part of Canada, it snowed. Where's my here? Where's the link? Oh, I sent it. Oh, fuck. I'm looking in the wrong place. There we go. Okay. Okay, I mean, I think this is the right thing. Is inviting somebody to a wish list, is that how you make them see it? I'm almost kind of scared to share my Goodreads profile because it has all of the crappy shit I read when I was a teenager. But I feel like, in a way, especially to the young, formerly gay trans men, it'd be kind of a good thing to see that I used to read the same garbage they used to read, you know? Okay, so I put my wish list and my Goodreads account in the description so you guys can like follow me on Goodreads or buy me books from my wish list or just see what's on my wish list. Honestly, guys, like, the book club sounds cool and everything, but I'm just doing so much stuff at once. Like, I'm trying to focus on school things, and I'm working 40 hours a week, and I'm doing detrans advocacy stuff. And that's kind of why I haven't done any YouTube videos in such a long time. It's like I don't have the fucking energy or brain power to do it. So like the most the most I can do, the closest thing I can do to a book club is kind of like reading one chapter and then discussing it on here. I kind of wanted to start that on Clubhouse because it's audio based. You can like have a literal actual discussion with people, but Clubhouse kind of suffers from the same problem as Giggle. There's not enough people on it. Like Clubhouse has a huge amount of members, but like rad femmes or lesbian feminists, not really. I would love to just keep adding more and more rad femmes and lesbian feminists on Clubhouse until we can just like have rad femme consciousness raising on there, because you can have private groups, closed groups. People can't see unless you add them. So it'll be like actually like a safe place for us to do something like that. You can also create clubs where the membership is private, so you can't see who's another member unless you're a member. So we could do things like you could be very careful about it and create rad femme spaces for people while keeping everyone safe, basically, on there. Oh my god, 2 hours and 15 minutes. Okay, guys, I think I actually have to end this because I need to put my laundry in the dryer and then I need to like do stuff to get ready for work in the morning. Yeah, so many people talk about how doing book clubs and not doing them, and not eventually doing them, or if they do them, it's like they do like one book and then it kind of falls apart. Like I've been in like book clubs where there's like 50 women and like 2 or 3 of the women actually read the book and like take part in the discussions, and everybody else just tunes in but they haven't read the book. Yeah, Clubhouse is pretty awesome. Liz, fuck. Message me either on Goodreads or email me jancycentric, one word, at gmail.com. Or DM me on Instagram. That's how I've been adding people, is like on Instagram. But I spend a fair amount of time, like when I'm driving, I spend time on Clubhouse, and I do like a once a week gender dissenters, which is I don't know if you guys know Hormone Hangover from Twitter. Her name is Grace, but she's on there with me, and Karina Cohn, who's like a gender critical trans woman. We do like a kind of like candid, non-PC discussions of like gender identity, transition, detransition, this kind of things, like once a week on there. So I get a fair amount of invites, so I can invite, like if I use all my invites to invite rad femmes or les femmes, I could build up a community there in a couple months. Yeah, Liz, message me on either Instagram or also Reddit. Fuck, you guys can message me on Reddit too. I never fucking go on there, but if you guys tell me you're gonna go on there, I'll check my messages. Yeah. But yeah, like I said, I need to go to bed soon and get ready for my work in the morning. So I'm gonna let you guys go. Let's do this again tomorrow, 6 p.m. Okay? 6 p.m. tomorrow. I mean, yeah, or go for it. I'll be down to promote it if such a thing existed. Like, if somebody made it happen, I would be down to, like, promoting it on my Instagram and my YouTube. But I definitely don't have the time or energy. Like, there's so many things that I want to do, like, in Canada, like, activism things, that I just, like, don't have the fucking energy to do. So, like, honestly, a book club is, like, the last thing on my radar right now. Yeah. Cheers, Kate. And Toss, and Horror, and Liz, and whoever else is still here. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Yeah, I forgot how chill live streams are. See you guys tomorrow. Bye.